The sun rose gently over the quiet fields, its golden rays casting long shadows across the rolling countryside. The morning air was crisp, carrying the faint scent of dew-kissed earth and wildflowers. Birds chirped their melodies from the trees lining the dusty, unpaved road, their songs blending with the occasional rustle of leaves stirred by a soft breeze. It was a peaceful, almost idyllic start to what seemed like an ordinary day. But amidst this tranquility, a scene of quiet despair and impending doom was unfolding on the seldom-used railway tracks that cut across the plains. A golden retriever lay tied to the cold, unforgiving steel rails. Her body, thin and emaciated, trembled not just from the morning chill, but from utter exhaustion and fear. Her once lustrous golden coat was now dull, matted, and clung tightly to her visibly protruding ribs, telling a silent story of neglect and hardship. Her large amber eyes, wide with terror, darted frantically back and forth, as if searching desperately for a salvation that seemed impossible. A coarse, weathered rope was cruelly knotted around her neck and one front leg, securing her fast to the rail with a ruthless finality. Huddled beside her, seeking the meager warmth and comfort of her weakened body, were 3 tiny puppies, barely a few weeks old. Their fragile forms shook uncontrollably from cold, hunger, and an instinctive sense of the surrounding dread. Their high-pitched, plaintive whimpers broke the stillness of the morning air, each tiny cry a heartbreaking plea for help they were too young to understand how to ask for. They nudged against their mother, trying to nurse, but her depleted body had little left to give. She could only offer weak, loving licks with a dry tongue, a final maternal gesture in the face of overwhelming despair. Then a faint sound carried on the breeze from the distance, a train's whistle. It started as a low hum, almost imperceptible, but steadily grew louder, sharper, more insistent. The ground beneath them began to vibrate, subtly at first, then with increasing intensity. The steel rails themselves started to hum, a low, resonant thrumming that vibrated through the mother dog's bound body, a deadly song signaling the approach of the locomotive. The mother dog lifted her head, ears pricked in alarm. She recognized the sound, the harbinger of destruction. A primal instinct surged through her weakened frame, and she began to struggle against the ropes, pulling and straining with what little strength she had left. But the knots were too tight, the rope too strong, her energy too depleted. Her struggles were futile, serving only to tighten the bindings. Defeated, she let out a mournful, low whine, her eyes fixed on the growing shape of the train now visible on the horizon, filled with an unimaginable terror. The puppies sensed their mother's escalating fear and cried louder, pressing themselves even closer against her, as if her frail body could somehow shield them from the oncoming thunder. Time seemed to stretch and warp, each second an eternity, yet the rhythmic clatter of wheels on steel and the piercing shriek of the whistle relentlessly counted down their final moments. Who could have committed such a cruel, heartless act, and could anyone possibly intervene before it was irrevocably too late? Driving along the quiet country road in his silver Toyota Camry, David Morgan lightly tapped the steering wheel to the rhythm of a familiar hymn playing softly on the radio. He was heading to the local high school where he taught English literature, his mind already organizing the day's lessons and faculty meeting notes. The car, though not new, was immaculately kept, its tidy interior reflecting David's steady and disciplined life. A small, simple wooden cross hung from the rearview mirror, a quiet testament to his enduring faith. At 50, David was the epitome of dedication, a beloved teacher, respected by his colleagues for his quiet wisdom, and adored by students for his passion, fairness, and knack for making classic literature feel relevant. His lessons often went beyond the textbook, infused with life experiences and insights drawn from his unwavering belief in God's grace and guidance. Yet beneath his composed exterior, David carried a profound and quiet burden. 3 years prior, he had lost his wife, Rebecca, to a relentless battle with cancer. Her absence left a void in his life that nothing, not his work, not his routines, not even the comforting rituals of his faith, seemed able to fill. The loss had been devastatingly hard on their daughter, Sarah, who was only 12 at the time, thrust into the turbulent waters of adolescence without her mother's gentle guidance and understanding. Now 15, Sarah had grown into a spirited, fiercely independent teenager. Her fiery independence often clashed sharply with David's structured, principled, and perhaps sometimes overly protective approach to parenting. The easy closeness they once shared had eroded, replaced by tension, misunderstandings, and silences that felt heavier than arguments. David often found himself awake late at night, wondering if he was doing enough, or perhaps trying too hard, if his attempts to provide structure felt like control to a daughter desperately seeking her own way. As his car navigated the gentle curves of the country road, David's thoughts inevitably turned to Sarah. She had been particularly distant lately, spending most of her free time with a group of friends he felt uneasy about, teenagers who seemed to share her disdain for authority and rules. He sighed deeply, his lips moving in a silent, familiar prayer. Lord, grant me wisdom to guide her, patience to understand her, and the strength to love her through these trying times, even when she pushes me away. His prayer was interrupted by an unusual sound, carried faintly on the wind, a high-pitched, desperate whimpering. David frowned, his teacher's instinct for noticing the unusual kicking in. He slowed the car, rolling down the window, letting the cool morning air rush in. The sound grew louder, sharper now, a note of genuine distress that tugged insistently at his heart. Rounding a bend shaded by a thicket of trees, his eyes locked onto a sight that made his blood run cold. There on the railway tracks just ahead lay the golden retriever and her 3 tiny puppies. The mother dog was struggling weakly against the ropes binding her, her movements growing more frantic as the distant train whistle echoed louder, closer. The puppies, too small to comprehend their imminent peril, cried helplessly beside her, their small bodies trembling. David's heart leaped into his throat. Adrenaline surged through him. Without a second thought, he slammed on the brakes, the tires screeching as the Camry skidded to a halt on the dusty shoulder of the road. He threw the car door open and sprinted towards the tracks, his legs pumping, his lungs burning. The train was now clearly visible in the distance, its hulking frame barreling down the rails at a terrifying speed. "Hang on," he yelled, the words torn from him by the wind, though he knew the dogs couldn't understand. His feet pounded against the uneven ground and sharp ballast stones as he closed the distance, his breath coming in sharp, ragged bursts. The vibrations from the tracks grew stronger with each step, the metallic hum of the rails a cruel, percussive reminder of the rapidly shrinking window of time. He dropped to his knees beside the terrified mother dog, his hands working frantically at the thick, stubborn knots securing her to the rail. The rope was old, coarse, and pulled incredibly tight, digging painfully into his palms as he struggled to loosen it. Sweat beaded on his forehead despite the cool air. The train's whistle blared again, deafeningly close now, its roar sending a shiver of pure fear down his spine. Come on, he muttered through gritted teeth, his fingers fumbling, trembling with urgency. The mother dog whimpered softly, her eyes locking onto his with a mixture of terror and a dawning flicker of desperate hope. Her puppies cried louder, their tiny bodies pressing against her as if begging her for a protection she couldn't provide. David risked a glance over his shoulder. The train was no more than a few hundred feet away, its massive form bearing down on them like an unstoppable force of nature. The ground shook violently. He whispered under his breath, another prayer escaping his lips. Lord, give me strength, please. With a final, desperate surge of adrenaline-fueled strength, he yanked hard. The main knot gave way. The rope slackened. David scrambled to pull it free from her leg and neck, his hands raw and burning. Instantly, he scooped up the 3 squirming, whimpering puppies into his arms, holding them protectively against his chest. Come on, girl, let's go. Now, he urged the mother dog. She hesitated for a split second, her legs shaky and unsteady from being bound and the sheer terror. Then, as if finally understanding the urgency, she scrambled to her feet and followed David as he bolted away from the tracks, stumbling but running. They lunged onto the grassy embankment just as the train thundered past where they had been moments before. The rush of wind and the deafening noise washed over David like a physical blow, knocking him off balance. He tumbled onto the grass, shielding the puppies with his body. For a moment there was silence, broken only by the receding rumble of the train. David lay sprawled on the grass, his chest heaving, clutching the tiny, squirming lives he had just saved. The mother dog collapsed beside him, her body trembling uncontrollably, but alive. She let out a soft whimper, then nudged David's arm gently with her nose, a clear gesture of gratitude. David exhaled deeply, the breath shuddering out of him. He let his head fall back against the cool earth, looking up at the vast, indifferent blue sky, now bright with the morning sun. "Thank you, Lord," he whispered, his voice hoarse with emotion. "Thank you." The distant sound of the train faded completely, leaving only the soft cries of the puppies and the steady, calming rhythm of David's own breathing. As he sat up, cradling the fragile lives he had risked his own to save, he knew instinctively that this moment, this terrifying, clarifying act of courage and compassion, would mark a profound turning point, not just for these animals, but for his own life and for his family. The journey back home was quiet, save for the occasional soft whimpers of the puppies nestled on a towel in David's lap, and the labored, shallow breaths of the golden retriever, lying exhausted on the backseat of his car. David drove cautiously, his mind racing with a mixture of profound relief and gnawing concern. He had saved their lives, but their frail, neglected condition made it starkly clear that this rescue was just the beginning of their recovery. As the Camry pulled into the driveway of his modest suburban home, David turned off the engine and sat for a moment, gathering his thoughts. His small house, with its neatly trimmed lawn and carefully tended flower beds, had always been a haven of routine and predictable order. But today it felt different, charged with an unexpected urgency, a sense of purpose he hadn't felt so acutely in years, perhaps not since Rebecca first fell ill. Opening the car door carefully, David carried the trembling puppies into the fenced backyard, where the shade of a sturdy old oak tree provided a cool, safe refuge. The mother dog followed weakly, her golden coat catching the afternoon sunlight as she limped painfully behind him. David gently set the puppies down on a clean, soft patch of grass. He went inside and returned with bowls of fresh water and the leftover roast chicken from the previous night's dinner, shredding it into small pieces. "Here you go, girl," he said softly, placing the food and water in front of the mother dog. She hesitated at first, her weary eyes darting nervously towards David, before she cautiously lapped at the water, then began to eat the chicken with a desperate hunger that spoke volumes about her recent ordeal. The puppies, still too small for solid food, nuzzled against their mother, seeking comfort and warmth. David knew he needed to get them all checked by a vet as soon as possible. Inside the house, Sarah sat sprawled on the living room couch, earbuds firmly in place, her thumbs flying across her phone screen. The muffled beat of a pop song pulsed as she scrolled through her social media feed, oblivious to the drama that had unfolded just miles away. Her auburn hair was pulled back in a messy bun, and her expression carried the carefully cultivated air of aloof indifference typical of teenagers navigating their complex world. Hearing the front door open and close, she glanced up briefly as David walked in. His clothes were still streaked with dirt and grease from the tracks, and his face looked more intensely focused than usual. Sarah raised an eyebrow, pulling out one earbud. "What happened to you?" she asked, her tone laced with mild sarcasm. "Wrestling in the mud or something?" David hesitated, then decided directness was best. It was better she heard it from him than discovered it later. "I found some dogs," he said simply. Sarah's interest was mildly piqued. "Dogs, like strays?" "Something like that," David replied, his voice carefully neutral. "They were in trouble. I brought them home." This was unusual enough to capture Sarah's full attention. She swung her legs off the couch and followed her father to the back door, peering out into the yard. She stopped abruptly at the sight of the golden retriever weakly tending to her 3 tiny puppies under the oak tree. "Whoa," she murmured, stepping closer to the screen door. "Where did you find them?" "On the railroad tracks," David said, his voice heavy with the memory. "They were tied up. Someone left them there to die. Sarah stiffened visibly. Her face betrayed a flicker of something unreadable. Shock, disbelief, or something else. She pushed the screen door open and crouched down a few feet away from the puppies, her fingers almost reaching out to touch their soft fur before pulling back. "Who would do something like that?" she asked again, her voice barely a whisper, her eyes fixed on the vulnerable creatures. David didn't answer immediately, but he watched her reaction closely. It was rare to see Sarah show such genuine interest, such unguarded emotion about anything he was involved in. For a fleeting moment, he thought he saw a glimmer of empathy, perhaps even remorse, in her usually guarded expression. Then just as quickly, it vanished, replaced by her familiar teenage mask. She stood up abruptly. "Well, hope you know what you're doing," she muttered, turning back towards the house. "Don't expect me to clean up after them." The door slammed shut behind her. Over the next few days, David devoted himself to nursing the dogs back to health. He gently cleaned the mother dog's raw wounds from the rope, fed her small, nutritious meals frequently, and ensured the puppies were kept warm, dry, and safe in a makeshift whelping box he constructed in a sheltered corner of the patio. He decided to call the mother dog Goldie. Sarah, though initially maintaining her distance as promised, began to linger in the backyard more often than usual. She'd sit on the steps, ostensibly scrolling through her phone, but David noticed her watching him work, observing his patient interactions with Goldie and the pups. Occasionally, she'd offer a small, almost grudging bit of help, holding a bowl, fetching a towel. She seemed particularly drawn to one of the puppies, the smallest, most timid one, the same one she'd almost touched that first day, a tiny creature with a soft whimper and large, soulful eyes. "Do they have names yet?" Sarah asked one evening, surprising David as she knelt beside the whelping box, gently stroking the tiny puppy's head. "Not yet," David said, glancing up from where he was carefully applying ointment to one of Goldie's healing sores. "I figured we'd wait until they're a bit stronger, more settled, before naming them all." Sarah nodded, her gaze distant, still focused on the puppy. For a brief moment, the usual tension between father and daughter seemed to dissipate, replaced by an unspoken understanding centered around the vulnerable animals. But the fragile peace was short-lived. A few days later, while David was cleaning the patio area where the dogs were staying, a neighbor, Mrs. Henderson, stopped by the fence. A kind woman, known for her sharp eyes and neighborhood awareness, she leaned over with a frown wrinkling her forehead. "David," she called out, her voice carrying a note of concern. "You've certainly been busy with those dogs, haven't you?" "Yes, ma'am," David replied politely, wiping his hands on a towel. "They needed some help. Why do you ask?" "Well," Mrs. Henderson said, hesitating slightly, "I overheard some of the neighborhood kids talking about what happened. They said the dogs got tied up on the tracks because the big one kept stealing food from them when they hung out near the old park. Sounded like some sort of prank that got way out of hand." David's heart sank. A cold dread washed over him. "Do you happen to know which kids they were, Mrs. Henderson?" he asked, trying to keep his voice steady. The neighbor hesitated again, clearly uncomfortable. Then she sighed. "I don't like to point fingers, David. Truly I don't, but, well, your Sarah's name came up. She's been hanging around a lot with that boy Noah Collins and young Grace Hayes lately. I think Ethan Vance might have been involved too. You know how kids can be, getting ideas into each other's heads." David thanked her quietly, his mind reeling. He returned to the backyard, the image of Sarah's fleeting expression when he first told her about the dogs flashing in his mind. Could his daughter, his Sarah, really have been part of such a cruel, dangerous act? It seemed impossible, utterly contrary to the values he tried to instill. And yet, as he thought about her recent withdrawn behavior, her unusual interest mixed with avoidance regarding the dogs, he couldn't ignore the gnawing, sickening feeling that Mrs. Henderson might be right. The puzzle pieces, the stolen food motive, the specific friends named, Sarah's strange reaction, were falling into place with horrifying clarity. That evening, after a tense, mostly silent dinner, David knew he had to confront Sarah. He found her in her room, earbuds in, scrolling through her phone as usual. He leaned against the doorframe, taking a moment to compose himself. "Sarah," he began, his voice quieter than he intended. She glanced up, her expression immediately guarded. "What's up?" "I need to ask you something important," he said carefully, stepping into the room. "And I need you to be completely honest with me. Were you and your friends, Noah, Grace, Ethan, involved in what happened to Goldie and her puppies? The reason I found them on the tracks?" Sarah froze. The color drained from her face for a moment, leaving her pale beneath her teenage bravado. Her eyes darted away, looking anywhere but at him. She looked like she might deny it, lash out, but then her shoulders slumped in defeat. We didn't mean to hurt them," she muttered, her voice barely audible, directed at the floor. David's heart ached with a mixture of anger, disappointment, and a strange sort of pity. He had hoped, prayed he was wrong. "Why, Sarah?" he asked, his voice strained. "Why would you do something like that?" "They kept stealing food from us," Sarah said defensively, finally looking up, her eyes flashing with a hint of defiance mixed with guilt. "We were just trying to scare them off, make them stay away from our spot. We didn't think the train would actually come." Her voice trailed off, the enormity of what could have happened washing over her face. David closed his eyes for a brief moment, struggling to contain his frustration and sorrow. He took a deep breath, reminding himself of the need for understanding, not just condemnation. "You tied helpless animals to a train track, Sarah," he said, his voice low but firm. "That's not a prank. That's cruelty. Potentially fatal cruelty." "I know," Sarah snapped back, tears finally brimming in her eyes and spilling down her cheeks. "I didn't think it would go that far. It was Noah's stupid idea, okay? It wasn't just me." David knelt in front of her then, meeting her tear-filled gaze, his voice softening slightly but losing none of its gravity. "It doesn't matter whose idea it was initially, sweetheart. You were part of it. You didn't stop it. And now it's our job, your job, all of your jobs, to make it right." Sarah looked away again, wiping furiously at her eyes. "What do you mean?" she asked sullenly. "You, Noah, Grace, and Ethan are going to help me take care of these dogs," David said firmly. "Every day. You're going to feed them, clean up after them, walk them when they're ready. You're going to apologize to them in the only way that truly matters, by showing them the kindness, patience, and responsibility you failed to show them before." Sarah hesitated, glancing towards the door as if considering escape. Then slowly, reluctantly, she nodded. Tears still streamed down her face, but for the first time in a long, long while, David saw beneath the tough exterior to the compassionate child he knew still existed within her, a child wrestling with guilt and the consequences of her actions. Little did either of them know, this painful confrontation was only the beginning of a challenging journey, one that would test them both, reshape their fractured relationship, and profoundly alter their understanding of compassion, forgiveness, and the true meaning of responsibility. The following afternoon, David decided it was time for the whole truth to come out. Not just for Sarah, but for her friends as well. The pieces were all there. Mrs. Henderson's account, Sarah's tearful confession, the unspoken guilt he now clearly recognized in her earlier interactions with the dogs. But he knew this meeting couldn't just be about assigning blame or meting out punishment. It had to be about understanding the root cause and fostering genuine remorse leading to change. David firmly believed that even actions as thoughtless and cruel as this often stemmed from a place of youthful insecurity, peer pressure, or misdirected anger that needed addressing, not just condemning. By late afternoon, the backyard was quiet except for the soft rustling of leaves in the oak tree and the occasional contented sigh from Goldie or a soft yip from one of the puppies in their whelping box. David sat on the back porch steps, Goldie resting calmly near his feet as Sarah reluctantly approached with her 3 friends trailing behind her. Noah Collins walked slightly ahead, his usual cocky grin replaced by an uneasy, sullen expression. Grace Hayes followed, her shoulders hunched, her eyes darting nervously around the yard, avoiding David's gaze. Ethan Vance lagged behind, his face impassive as usual, though the tension in his tightly clenched fists betrayed his inner discomfort. "Thank you all for coming," David said, his tone steady but undeniably firm. He gestured for them to sit on the steps opposite him. "We need to talk about what happened with Goldie and her pups." Noah was the first to speak, his voice defensive, attempting his usual bravado. "Look, Mr. Morgan, we already told Sarah. We didn't mean to hurt them. It was just like a dumb prank." David interrupted him, his voice sharper now, cutting through the attempted minimization. "You tied helpless animals, including 3 tiny puppies, to active train tracks. Does that honestly sound like just a prank to any of you?" Noah faltered, his gaze finally dropping to the ground beside his worn sneakers. Grace sniffled softly beside him, wiping at her eyes with the sleeve of her hoodie. Ethan, arms crossed tightly across his chest, remained silent, but his jaw tightened visibly. David continued, his voice softening slightly but laced with unwavering conviction. "I'm not here to humiliate you or to make you feel worse than I hope you already do. But I need to understand why you did it. Help me understand. Start from the beginning." Noah hesitated before speaking again, his usual confidence crumbling under David's steady, non-judgmental but serious gaze. "We were hanging out, down by the creek near the old park," he mumbled. "We had some hot dogs and in the big one." He motioned awkwardly towards Goldie. "She just came out of nowhere and snatched one right out of Grace's hand. She looked really hungry, kind of mangy." Grace added quietly, her voice trembling. But we were mad because we didn't have much food left, and we thought she was being aggressive." Her face crumpled with guilt. Ethan finally spoke, his tone flat, almost detached, but his words carried weight. "It was Noah's idea to tie them up near the tracks, to scare her off for good. I didn't really want to, but I didn't try to stop him either." "Oh, come on, Ethan," Noah snapped, his defensiveness flaring up again. "You laughed about it. Don't act like you weren't in on it." "That's enough." David's voice cut through their burgeoning argument, instantly silencing the group. He exhaled slowly, running a hand through his hair, a gesture of weariness and frustration. "You all made a mistake, a terrible, dangerous mistake that could have had horrific consequences. But the way forward isn't through blaming each other. It's through understanding the severity of what you've done and taking responsibility together." The words hung heavy in the late afternoon air. The teenagers shifted uncomfortably under David's direct gaze. Sarah, who had remained silent until now, finally spoke, her voice small, barely audible. "I didn't think it would go that far, Dad. We just wanted to scare them away." David turned to her, his eyes filled with a complex mix of disappointment and compassion. "And what if I hadn't driven by at that exact moment, Sarah? What if that train had come just a minute or two sooner?" Sarah's face flushed deeply, her eyes welling up with fresh tears as the reality of that possibility hit her fully. "I didn't think—" "That's exactly the problem," David interrupted gently but firmly. "You didn't think. None of you thought about the potential outcome, about the value of these lives. But now, you have to. Now, you're going to learn." He looked at each of them in turn, his voice steady and resolute. "As I told Sarah last night, I'm not going to call your parents or the authorities this time, though perhaps I should. Instead, I'm going to give you a chance to learn from this. These dogs need care, patience, and kindness. Everything you failed to show them before. You are all going to spend time here, every day after school and on weekends, helping me care for them. You're going to learn what it truly means to be responsible for a life other than your own." The teens looked at each other, uncertainty, apprehension, and guilt etched onto their young faces. Noah was the first to break the silence, still focused on the practicalities. "What do you mean? Like feed them or something?" "Feed them, clean up after them, help socialize the puppies, walk Goldie once she's stronger," David replied calmly. "You'll work together. You'll be here every day until these dogs are fully healthy, happy, and ready to move on to safe, loving homes. That's how you'll begin to make this right." Grace nodded almost immediately, tears still streaming down her face but a flicker of resolve in her eyes. "Okay," she whispered. "Okay, Mr. Morgan, I'll do it." Ethan hesitated for a long moment, his arms still crossed, his expression unreadable. Then, after glancing briefly at Goldie and the pups, he gave a single, curt nod. "Fine." Noah sighed dramatically, rolling his eyes but lacking his usual conviction. "Whatever. I guess it's better than being grounded for eternity." Over the next few days and weeks, the transformation was slow but palpable. The backyard became the center of their afternoons. Noah, initially reluctant and prone to complaining, gradually began channeling his restless energy in surprising ways. He started fashioning simple toys for the puppies out of old tennis balls he found and scraps of sturdy rope from David's shed. Though he pretended not to care, often tossing the toys dismissively toward the pups, his face would invariably light up with a flicker of pride each time one of the puppies eagerly pounced on his creations, growling playfully. Grace, the quietest and seemingly most remorseful of the group, found solace and a quiet strength in tending to Goldie. She spent hours patiently brushing Goldie's matted fur, speaking softly to her, untangling the knots with gentle fingers. The once perpetually nervous dog began to visibly relax in Grace's presence, her tail offering faint, tentative wags each time the girl approached. Grace seemed to bloom under the responsibility, her shyness receding as her connection with the gentle mother dog deepened. Ethan, true to his reserved nature, initially kept to himself, performing his assigned tasks efficiently but with little interaction. However, over time he found himself drawn to the smallest and shyest of the puppies, the one Sarah had also noticed. He began spending extra time with the timid pup, taking him for short, quiet walks around the yard, away from the boisterous play of his siblings. He seemed to understand the little dog's need for space and gentle encouragement. The two formed a quiet, undemonstrative bond built on mutual understanding. He eventually named the pup Finn. Sarah, meanwhile, surprised David the most. After the initial shock and shame, she threw herself into the work with an earnestness and dedication he hadn't seen in years. Whether it was carefully measuring puppy food, diligently cleaning the whelping box, or simply sitting beside Goldie in the quiet of the evening, she seemed to find a sense of purpose, a way to channel her guilt into positive action. And though she didn't articulate it often, David could see the silent apology in her every interaction, directed not just toward the dogs, but towards him as well. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, bathing the backyard in a warm golden light, David sat on the porch steps, watching the scene unfold. Noah was tossing a frayed rope toy for one of the more energetic puppies, laughing as it tumbled head over heels in its clumsy pursuit. Grace sat cross-legged beside Goldie, her hands gently stroking the animal's now glossy, recovering coat. Ethan leaned against the oak tree, the smallest puppy, Finn, curled up contentedly at his feet, its tiny snores barely audible in the growing stillness. And Sarah, playing gently with the third pup, looked up and caught his eye, offering a small, genuine smile, a smile he realized he hadn't seen directed at him in a very long time. David exhaled deeply, a faint smile tugging at the corners of his own mouth. The road to healing and true understanding was just beginning, but he could clearly see the seeds of change taking root. These children, once careless and thoughtless in their actions, were actively learning what it meant to care, to nurture, and to take responsibility for the consequences of their choices. As he watched them, David instinctively clasped the small wooden cross around his neck and whispered a quiet prayer of gratitude. "Thank you, Lord, for guiding them, for softening their hearts, and for guiding me through this." Though the journey ahead would undoubtedly still have its challenges, David knew this was the turning point, not just for the rescued dogs, but for the teenagers entrusted with their care, and for the fragile, rebuilding relationship between himself and his daughter. The mornings at David's home now began not with tense silence, but with the cheerful commotion of yipping puppies and the purposeful bustling of teenagers arriving for their duties before school. The backyard, once a quiet space dominated by the shade of the old oak tree, had transformed into a lively, if sometimes chaotic, haven for Goldie and her 3 growing pups. Each day, David gathered Sarah, Noah, Grace, and Ethan, assigning tasks and using their shared responsibility as a continuous opportunity for growth and reflection. Today, we're focusing on trust, David announced one crisp morning as the group stood in a semicircle around the dogs. Goldie, now looking much healthier and more confident, watched them with cautious but increasingly trusting eyes. Her puppies tumbled over each other near her feet, their boundless energy drawing chuckles even from the usually reserved Ethan. "What do you mean by trust, Mr. Morgan?" Grace asked, her hand automatically reaching out to stroke Goldie's head, a gesture now met with a gentle lean from the dog. David crouched down slightly, meeting her gaze. "It means understanding what they need, anticipating their reactions, and consistently showing them that they're safe with us. Goldie and her pups have been through a terrifying ordeal. Every gentle touch, every kind word, every predictable routine helps them heal and learn to trust people again. It's our job to rebuild that bridge." Noah smirked, tossing a well-worn tennis ball toy he'd made from hand to hand. "So basically, don't screw it up?" "Something like that, Noah," David replied, raising an eyebrow, but suppressing a smile at the boy's typical bluntness. "But more importantly, actively build it up through patience and positive reinforcement." Over the following days, the group settled into a more comfortable rhythm. Noah, initially the most outwardly resistant, began channeling his restless energy into more elaborate toy-making projects. He scavenged old towels and t-shirts, braiding them into sturdy tug toys, and even figured out how to stuff treats inside a hollow rubber ball he found. One afternoon, he proudly presented a complex-looking braided rope toy. "Check it out," Noah said, tossing it towards the most boisterous puppy. The little dog pounced on it immediately, tugging and growling with mock ferocity. Grace clapped her hands, a genuine smile lighting up her face. "That's amazing, Noah. How did you do that?" Noah shrugged, feigning nonchalance, but the hint of a grin betrayed his pride. "Yeah, well, figured they needed something tougher to chew on besides my sneakers." Grace, who had always been shy and hesitant in group settings, found her own confidence blossoming as her bond with Goldie deepened. Every afternoon, she meticulously brushed Goldie's coat, patiently untangling any remaining knots and reveling in the healthy sheen that was returning. Goldie's tail now wagged readily each time Grace approached, a silent testament to the trust the gentle girl had patiently earned. One evening, during their informal end-of-day chat, Grace spoke up, her voice quiet but steady. "I've never really felt good at anything before," she admitted, running the brush smoothly over Goldie's back. "But this, taking care of her, it feels right, like I'm actually making a difference." "You are, Grace," David said, his tone warm and encouraging. "You're helping more than you know. You have a real gift for gentle care." Ethan, the most reserved of the group, continued his quiet connection with the smallest puppy, Finn. The two formed an almost telepathic bond, Ethan often simply sitting near Finn while the pup explored the yard, offering quiet reassurance without overwhelming him. He started teaching Finn simple commands like sit and stay, with remarkable patience. "You've got a real knack for the quiet ones, haven't you?" David observed one afternoon, watching Ethan praise Finn softly for finally mastering stay for a few seconds. Ethan just shrugged, his focus still on the puppy. "I guess I get it. Sometimes you just need space, someone to be patient." David nodded, sensing the unspoken parallels to the boy's own life. "And sometimes," David added gently, "you just need someone who understands without needing a lot of words." Ethan glanced up then, a flicker of understanding in his usually guarded eyes. "Yeah, maybe." Amidst all this, the dynamic between David and Sarah continued its slow, tentative shift. Their interactions, once marked primarily by friction and misunderstanding, grew easier, more frequent, as they worked side by side, united by their shared concern for the dogs. David noticed the small but significant changes, Sarah staying behind voluntarily to help clean up after the others had left, the sound of her genuine laughter ringing out as she played fetch with the increasingly confident puppies. The way she occasionally looked at him, not with defiance, but with a complex expression that seemed to hold both lingering guilt and a growing respect, perhaps even gratitude. One evening, long after the others had gone home, David and Sarah sat together on the porch steps, watching the sunset paint the sky in breathtaking shades of orange, pink, and purple. Goldie lay peacefully at their feet, her eyes half closed, while one of the puppies nuzzled contentedly against her side. "You're really good at this, you know," Sarah said suddenly, breaking the comfortable silence. David glanced at her, surprised by the unexpected compliment and the softness in her tone. "Good at what?" "This. Helping people. Teaching, I guess. Not just the school stuff, but this stuff. Just being there when it matters. Fixing things." David's heart swelled with a warmth he hadn't felt in a long time, but he kept his tone light. "Well, teaching is my job, isn't it?" Sarah offered a faint smile. "Not everyone would take the time, Dad, especially not with a bunch of messed up kids like us after what we did." "You're not messed up," David said firmly, turning to look her directly in the eye. "You made a serious mistake. You're learning from it. We all are. That's the important part." He paused, then decided to share something he hadn't before. "You know, your mom, Rebecca, she had a real heart for strays too. Animals, people, anyone who seemed lost or hurting." Sarah looked up, her interest caught. "Really? I don't remember that much." "You were young," David said gently, "but she was always bringing home something or someone that needed care. There was this one time, a big thunderstorm, she found this terrified little kitten huddled under a bush, soaked and shivering. She brought it in, dried it off, fed it warm milk with an eyedropper for days until it was strong enough to eat on its own. Then she spent weeks finding it the perfect home." He smiled at the memory. "She just had this capacity for compassion. She believed everyone deserved a second chance, a little kindness." Sarah listened intently, her usual teenage indifference replaced by a genuine curiosity about this side of her mother she hadn't known. "I never knew she did all that." "There's a lot you didn't know," David replied softly. "Maybe I was so busy trying to keep everything together after she passed. I forgot to share those parts of her with you. The parts of her I see shining through in you now, especially these past few weeks. I'm sorry for that." Sarah shook her head quickly. "You don't have to apologize, Dad. You've done so much for me, for us." David smiled, his heart swelling with pride and a deep, abiding gratitude. "We're a team, you and me. Always have been, even when things were rough. And I think your mom would be incredibly proud of the young woman you're becoming." As the days turned into weeks, the group began to function almost seamlessly, each member contributing their unique strengths. Noah's increasingly creative toys kept the now highly energetic puppies entertained and mentally stimulated. Grace's gentle, consistent care had helped Goldie fully regain her physical strength and her trust in humans. Ethan's quiet, patient presence had nurtured the most timid of the pups, Finn, into a more confident, curious dog. And Sarah, no longer distant or defiant, now took genuine pride in her role, often taking the lead in organizing their daily tasks and ensuring nothing was overlooked. They had decided to name the other two puppies Dash and Penny. Through their shared care for these animals rescued from the brink, they learned lessons far beyond basic animal husbandry. They discovered patience reflected in the enthusiastic wagging tails that greeted their efforts each day. They glimpsed forgiveness in Goldie's soft, trusting gaze. They cultivated compassion as they tended to the small, furry lives that depended entirely on them. And though none of them articulated it directly, each carried the quiet, growing satisfaction of knowing they were actively making amends, not just to the dogs, but perhaps also to themselves and to each other. For David, the transformation he witnessed felt profound, almost miraculous. The once fractured group of teenagers, brought together by a shared act of cruelty, was growing into individuals who cared, who tried, who learned from their mistakes. And as he watched Sarah laughing freely with her friends in the backyard, the defensive wall she had built around herself slowly crumbling, he felt a deep sense of gratitude wash over him. One evening, as the last rays of sunlight bathed the yard in a warm, golden glow, David clasped the cross around his neck again, his heart full. "Thank you, Lord," he whispered, "for showing them and showing me the undeniable power of kindness, responsibility, and second chances." Though there was still much healing to be done, David knew they were firmly on the right path. This journey, born out of a terrible mistake, had unexpectedly become one of redemption, compassion, and connection. A journey that was transforming not just the dogs, but everyone involved in ways they were only beginning to understand. The backyard was bustling with a unique blend of excitement and bittersweet emotion. Goldie lay peacefully under the oak tree, watching with maternal pride as her 3 puppies, now robust and brimming with energy, tumbled over each other with wagging tails and playful barks. The teenagers were scattered around the yard, each holding a brand new leash and nervously adjusting a colorful collar on one of the pups. Today was the day Noah, Grace, and Ethan would be taking the puppies they had bonded with most closely to their new forever homes, their own. David stood on the porch, a complex smile of pride, fondness, and a touch of sadness lighting up his face as he watched the scene. The transformation in these young people over the past few weeks had been as heartwarming and remarkable as the physical and emotional recovery of the dogs themselves. From the moment they had reluctantly agreed to take responsibility for their actions, they had steadily grown into more thoughtful, compassionate, and responsible individuals. "All right," David called out, clapping his hands together gently to get their attention. "Everyone ready? Got all their supplies?" The teens nodded, their excitement clearly tinged with the poignancy of the moment. Over the weeks, strong attachments had formed. While thrilled to be taking one puppy home, saying goodbye to the others and to Goldie felt like parting with a newly formed, unconventional family. Noah was the first to step forward, crouching down to scoop up the largest and most boisterous of the puppies, Dash, a furry ball of boundless energy with intelligent, watchful eyes. "This guy's coming with me," Noah declared, a wide, genuine grin splitting his face, a far cry from his earlier sullenness. The puppy barked sharply in seeming agreement, squirming excitedly in Noah's arms, eager for the next adventure. Noah laughed, adjusting his hold. The once arrogant teenager now looked genuinely proud and slightly overwhelmed by the prospect of this new responsibility. "Dash is definitely going to keep you on your toes, Noah," David said, chuckling. "But I think you're more than ready for the challenge." "Yeah," Noah replied, his voice steady with newfound confidence. "Yeah, I think I am." Next was Grace, who knelt beside the gentlest puppy, Penny, the one with the slightly lighter coat and quieter demeanor, who often sought out Grace's lap during their playtime. Grace carefully adjusted the soft pink collar around its neck, her hands trembling slightly with a mixture of nervous excitement and sadness. "I'm calling her Penny," Grace said softly, stroking the puppy's head tenderly, "because she's sweet and gentle and deserves a pretty name." David smiled warmly. "Penny is incredibly lucky to have you, Grace. You have a real gift for bringing out the best, most trusting nature in others, human or canine." Grace blushed slightly at the praise, but her smile was bright and confident as she carefully lifted Penny into her arms. For someone who had once doubted her own abilities so deeply, this moment felt like a quiet declaration of newfound self-worth and committed love. Ethan stood slightly apart, cradling the smallest puppy, Finn, securely in his arms. Finn had grown significantly under Ethan's patient, quiet care, but still retained his slightly shy, observant nature. Ethan had always been exceptionally gentle and intuitive with Finn, understanding the little dog's need for patience, reassurance, and a calm environment. "I think Finn's going to like it at my place," Ethan said, glancing at David, his usual reserve softened by affection for the pup. "We've got a big yard and it's pretty quiet. My mom already bought him a bed." David nodded, sensing the deep, unspoken connection between the quiet boy and the sensitive dog. "He's going to thrive with you, Ethan, and I have a feeling you'll thrive with him too." Ethan's expression softened further as he scratched Finn gently behind the ears. "Yeah, maybe. We'll figure things out together." As the teens prepared to leave with their new companions, David felt a pang of bittersweet pride. These young people, who had started this journey by committing an act of careless cruelty, had genuinely grown into responsible and caring individuals. Their bond with the puppies had been undeniably transformative, not just for the animals who now had loving homes secured, but profoundly so for themselves. Before they left, David gathered them near the porch where Goldie now stood beside him, her golden coat gleaming healthily in the afternoon sun. "I want to say something before you all go," David began, his voice steady but full of emotion. "What you've done here, for these dogs and more importantly, for yourselves, is truly remarkable. You faced up to a serious mistake, you took responsibility, and you put in the hard work to make things right. You've shown that people can change, that empathy can be learned, and that mistakes can be mended with kindness, effort, and commitment. I hope you carry that knowledge, that strength with you wherever life takes you." The teens nodded, their eyes reflecting the weight and sincerity of his words. One by one, they mumbled their thanks to him, their gratitude genuine and heartfelt. Then, with their precious puppies held carefully, they headed off, embarking on a new chapter filled with wagging tails, chewed slippers, and the enduring rewards of unconditional love. As the yard grew quiet again, David turned to Sarah, who stood silently beside him, watching her friends depart. "You okay?" he asked gently. Sarah nodded, her gaze fixed on Goldie, who now leaned companionably against her leg. "Yeah, it's just weird. The puppies are gone, but it feels right, you know." "It does," David agreed. He crouched down to scratch Goldie behind the ears, a familiar gesture of affection. "And this beautiful girl is staying right here with us." Sarah smiled then, her face lighting up with genuine warmth. "She's really part of the family now, huh?" "She always was," David replied softly. "From the moment we brought her home. She just needed time to make it official." The days that followed settled into a quieter but richer rhythm. Goldie, now fully recovered and thriving, gracefully settled into her role as both a beloved companion and a living, breathing reminder of the journey they had all undertaken together. Sarah took immense pride in caring for her, taking her for long walks through the neighborhood, grooming her golden coat until it shone, or simply curling up with her on the porch swing in the evenings, reading aloud or just enjoying the comfortable silence. For David, this new chapter marked a profound and welcome turning point in his relationship with Sarah. The chasm of grief, misunderstanding, and teenage rebellion that had once defined their bond had been bridged, replaced by shared moments of warmth, easy conversation, and mutual understanding. Goldie had become far more than just a rescued dog. She was the furry, four-legged catalyst that had helped bring a father and daughter back together. Occasionally, Noah, Grace, and Ethan would stop by, proudly bringing Dash, Penny, and Finn for visits, sharing amusing stories of their puppy's antics, growth, and the challenges and joys of puppy ownership. Each visit was filled with laughter, shared advice, and a sense of easy camaraderie that had once seemed utterly impossible. As David watched the teenagers interact, their newfound maturity and genuine affection for their dogs shining through, he felt a deep, quiet sense of fulfillment. What had begun as a senseless tragedy, an act born of anger and thoughtlessness, had miraculously transformed into a powerful story of redemption, forgiveness, love, and the surprising, enduring power of second chances. Goldie nudged his hand gently with her wet nose, her tail giving a soft thump-thump against the porch floor. David smiled, kneeling beside her, looking into her intelligent, trusting eyes. "You're the heart of all this, you know," he murmured softly, stroking her smooth head. "You brought us all together, didn't you, girl?" Goldie's eyes met his, her gaze steady and filled with an unwavering affection and trust that spoke volumes. And in that quiet moment, David knew that though life would continue to bring its inevitable challenges and sorrows, they had found something incredibly precious, a new beginning firmly rooted in kindness, responsibility, and the unbreakable, resilient bonds of family, both human and canine. The morning sun streamed through the kitchen window, casting a warm, cheerful glow over the small table where David and Sarah sat finishing breakfast. Goldie lay comfortably at their feet, her golden coat gleaming like spun silk in the soft light. A peaceful, harmonious rhythm had settled into their lives, a rhythm shaped by the quiet joys of caring for one another, and for Goldie, and by the unspoken gratitude for how far they had come from those first tense, difficult days. Sarah poured herself a second cup of coffee, a habit she'd recently picked up from her father, and glanced down fondly at Goldie. "She really knows she belongs here now, doesn't she?" she said with a contented smile. David looked up from the morning newspaper, his eyes twinkling. "I think she always knew she belonged somewhere safe and loved. We were just the lucky ones who got to provide it." Goldie let out a soft woof, as if agreeing, her tail giving a lazy thump against the cool tile floor. Sarah reached down instinctively to scratch behind her ears, a gesture that had become second nature to them both. "I think she knows she's finally home," Sarah said softly. David nodded, setting the paper aside. "And in a way," he added thoughtfully, "I think we found our way back home too." Though the puppies had moved on to their new families, they were never far from David and Sarah's thoughts or lives. Noah, Grace, and Ethan had faithfully kept their promise to stay in touch, sharing photos and updates regularly. The unique bond forged through their shared experience of rescuing and caring for the dogs remained surprisingly strong. One sunny Saturday afternoon, the backyard was once again alive with youthful energy and happy barking as the three friends visited with their now considerably larger puppies. Dash, living up to his name, darted around the yard like a furry brown blur, chasing a frisbee Noah expertly tossed for him. Penny sat calmly beside Grace on the grass, her gentle, sweet demeanor unchanged, though she now watched the world with quiet confidence. Finn trotted closely behind Ethan, still observant but significantly more outgoing, eagerly greeting both David and Sarah before nudging Ethan for attention. "They've grown so much," Sarah exclaimed, watching the playful chaos unfold with a laugh. "They certainly have," David agreed, leaning against the porch railing, "and so have their owners." Noah walked over, wiping a bead of sweat from his brow after a particularly energetic round of fetch. "Dash is still a handful, Mr. Morgan, but I think he's teaching me patience. Whether I like it or not," he said with a wry grin that held no trace of his former arrogance. Grace laughed, gently detangling a leaf from Penny's soft fur. "Penny's basically my shadow now. She follows me everywhere. My mom says she's the best listener in the house." Ethan, standing nearby, added quietly, scratching Finn behind the ears. "Finn's different now. Calmer, more confident, I guess. He's good for me, helps me get out of my own head." David smiled, his heart swelling with a quiet pride that felt deep and true. "You've all done an incredible job. Those pups couldn't have asked for better homes or more dedicated young people to love them." As the afternoon wore on, the teenagers and their dogs eventually settled into the shade of the old oak tree. Stories flowed easily, punctuated by happy yaps and contented sighs from the dogs. Tales of Dash's mischievous, sock-stealing escapades, Penny's uncanny knack for finding the sunniest and coziest spots for naps, and Finn's newfound bravery in facing the neighbor's grumpy cat. Sarah joined in enthusiastically, recounting Goldie's endearing quirks. Her insistence on helping David garden, her nightly ritual of bringing them a present, usually a well-loved squeaky toy, before bed, and the countless ways she had seamlessly become the heart of their small family. For the first time in what felt like forever, the sound of Sarah's easy, unreserved laughter filled the air, and David couldn't help but marvel again at the profound transformation in his daughter. He thought of Rebecca, imagining her warm smile, knowing how incredibly proud she would have been to see the compassionate, responsible, and loving young woman Sarah was becoming. The ache of Rebecca's absence was still present, a quiet hum beneath the surface of his days, but it was no longer a crushing weight. It was slowly transmuting into a gentle warmth, a treasured memory that brought comfort more often than pain. That evening, as the last rays of sunlight painted the clouds in strokes of fiery orange and soft violet, The teens said their goodbyes, promising to arrange another puppy play date soon. Goldie and Sarah walked them to the front gate, Goldie giving each departing pup a dignified sniff, their presence a quiet, happy reminder of the unlikely journey that had brought all their lives together. After everyone had gone, David and Sarah sat together on the porch swing, the peaceful quiet of the early evening settling comfortably around them like a soft blanket. Goldie lay sprawled contentedly at their feet, her rhythmic breathing a soothing sound in the stillness. "Do you think Mom would be proud of us?" Sarah asked suddenly, her voice soft, almost hesitant in the twilight. David turned to her, his expression tender in the dimming light. "Oh, sweetheart, I know she would be. More than words can say. Rebecca always believed so strongly in the power of love and kindness to heal, to mend what's broken, and she would be bursting with pride to see how you've embraced those very things, how you've let them change you, guide you." Sarah smiled, a genuine, heartfelt smile that reached her eyes, making them glisten slightly. I think I'm finally starting to understand what she meant. What you both tried to teach me about how love isn't just something you feel, it's something you do." David reached over, placing his hand gently over hers where it rested on the swing beside them. "That's the most important lesson she ever taught me," he said quietly. "And now, look at you. You're living it. You're teaching it to others through your actions." As the first stars began to prick the darkening velvet sky, David and Sarah sat in comfortable silence, their bond renewed, stronger and more resilient than ever before. Goldie stirred at their feet, her tail thumping softly against the wooden porch floor, a steady beat reminding them of her constant, comforting presence. "Do you think we'll keep hearing from Noah, Grace, and Ethan?" Sarah asked after a while. David chuckled softly. "Knowing them, and judging by their stories about those energetic pups of theirs, I have a feeling we'll be getting updates, calls for advice, and invitations for play dates for a very long time to come." Sarah laughed, leaning her head back against the swing's cushion. "Good, it feels nice. Being connected like this, being part of something bigger than just myself." David nodded, his heart full. "That's what life is truly about, Sarah. It's about the connections we make, the responsibility we take, and the love we choose to share, especially when it's hard. Those are the things that truly last." As the night deepened, David instinctively clasped the small wooden cross around his neck, silently thanking God for the unexpected, challenging, yet ultimately redemptive journey they had all taken. What had begun as a cruel act born from youthful anger and thoughtlessness had blossomed into an enduring story of forgiveness, kindness, responsibility, and love, a testament to the resilience of the human spirit, the healing power of compassion, and the unbreakable bonds that connect us all, sometimes in the most surprising of ways. Goldie sighed contentedly at their feet, a living, breathing, golden thread woven inextricably through the fabric of their lives, reminding them always of the love that had brought them together and the quiet promise of a brighter, more hopeful tomorrow. Life often surprises us, weaving unexpected connections and profound lessons into the fabric of our ordinary days. Through Goldie and her puppies, David, Sarah, Noah, Grace, and Ethan discovered that love is far more than just a fleeting feeling. It's a conscious action. It's demonstrated in the patient care we give, the forgiveness we offer even when it's difficult, and the countless small moments where we choose to show kindness and take responsibility. Their journey teaches us that no matter how broken or strained a bond may seem, whether between parent and child, between friends, or between humans and animals, with love, patience, effort, and compassion, it can be rebuilt, often emerging stronger and more resilient than before. David and Sarah's story is a poignant reminder of the beauty of second chances, not only for the vulnerable dogs they saved from a terrible fate, but also for their own fractured relationship and for the hearts of the young people who learned to choose empathy over anger. And woven throughout every step of their challenging journey, the quiet presence of love and grace could be felt, guiding them towards healing, growth, and the strengthening of the ties that bind us all. Goldie became more than just a pet. She became a symbol of hope, a living golden thread that brought together a grieving father and his struggling daughter, a group of once wayward teens seeking direction, and ultimately forged a small community bound by newfound compassion. Perhaps God's love works in similar ways, connecting us in patterns we often don't immediately see, teaching us to find joy in giving, patience in forgiveness, and to cherish the precious bonds we share.